Okay, welcome to Emerging Adulthood, Adult Development, and Aging. Let me try to get to my next slide. There we go. All right. The pattern of development is the product of physical processes, cognitive processes, and socio-emotional processes. So what this is saying is it's basically all about physical development, how it is we change over time. This is called senescence. It's not up here, but that's what it's termed. There's cognitive processes, changes in individuals' thinking, intelligence, and language falls under that. And then there's socio-emotional processes, how it is we change in terms of individual relationships with others, our emotions, and our personality. How does all of that factor in as we age? When it comes to early adulthood, or emerging adulthood, this begins in our late teens, so right around 19 to early 20s and lasts throughout our 30s. Needless to say, I am out of the early adulthood phase and I'm getting closer to middle adulthood. So, join the party if you're over 30. Early adulthood is a time of establishing personal and economic independence, developing a career, selecting a mate, learning to live with someone in an intimate way, starting a family, and rearing children. All of these things that are mentioned here are themes of early adulthood. Early adulthood. The major theme is independence and relationships. So in early adulthood, that's the two things that we look at: forming relationships with someone else, and starting all kinds of new avenues in life. For one thing, they've mentioned here career and starting a family. When it comes to middle adulthood, this period is from 40 years of age to about 60. Middle adulthood is a time of expanding personal and social involvement and responsibility. You'll find this time to be involved in even things like religion or in community, assisting next generation in becoming competent, mature individuals. Usually between 40 and 60, we're becoming grandparents. And the next generation, we're definitely looking for them to be better than our generation. Reaching and maintaining satisfaction in a career. You're at the peak at this time in career. Now, things have changed a bit where people are not retiring in their 60s anymore. They are, but, there's a select few that do stay on the job until death. So, there's some things where it is, some things have changed depending on where it is you are in society. But for some people, they don't reach or maintain that satisfaction in career even into their 40s and 60s. So the theme in this particular age group, you would have to say, would be expanding personal and social involvement and, of course, responsibility. During late adulthood, this period begins in the 60s and lasts until death. So if you're over age 65, you're considered to be in late adulthood. It's a time of adjusting to retirement. Well, we're supposed to be adjusting to retirement after this time. Decreasing strength and health is usually common. This is when it is we start being very concerned about our health. And research shows that we're actually going to the doctor a whole lot more over the age of 65. There's new social roles. You're definitely a grandparent by then. Okay, and then we're reviewing one's life. People believe that satisfaction with life declines as we age. In fact, research shows that satisfaction with life actually improves. We don't all get old and just look back at our lives with regret that we're aging or getting old. In fact, we don't have the same pressures that young adults have, which is rearing children anymore. All of our children are grown by that time. Unless, of course, you're that, individual that has that headache of that one child that, doesn't come too often to visit or wants to put you in a home. There are cases like that, obviously, but, we're not that miserable as people think we are when it is we're over 65. Degree of personal life, investment at different points of life. So 25 to 34, this talks about the different themes: work, friends, family, and independence. And it talks about it in that order. So we invest a lot of time into work between ages 25 to 34. Yay, I'm 34. So I guess, the fact that I'm up at 1:37 in the morning on my day off during what is supposed to be spring break, pretty much makes this, it makes it correct for me, at least for this particular age group. You do tend to put work first because you're trying to build yourself. Friends normally come sometime after that. Now, I'm not too sure about friends and family. I would put family at the top, but then that's normally between 35 and 54. But I would say family should be at the top. And then there's independence, because it's all about being independent, being out on your own, paying your own bills, and doing your own thing. 35 to 54, family, work, friends, and cognitive fitness. We're still hoping to keep our marbles intact because, between 35 and 54, you start to realize there's a slight decline in your cognitive abilities. You start to forget things. You start to slow down a little bit with your thinking and computing skills. So we're all about trying to keep that sharp through cognitive fitness. So we try to read a little bit more, or maybe watch a couple more documentaries, as I have started to do myself. 55 to 65 years old, family is everything. Health is right behind family, because you sort of realize that your health may start to decline. After all, you are getting older. So you'll go to the doctor more often for issues with sight and hearing and other complications. Then, of course, there's friends and cognitive fitness. By the time you're 70 to 84, common themes are family, health, cognitive fitness, and friends, but not in the same order as it was from 55 to 65. And then if you're lucky to get to 85 to 105 years old, forget about friends. Friends is not even on the list anymore, right? Health is at the forefront. Half of your family have died if you're 105, but family, whatever family you have left, is important. You're thinking about life. You're probably even thinking about death, and you're still thinking about, how lucky you are that you still have your marbles because you can remember your middle name. So cognitive fitness is still a theme during this time, according to the writers. I find that to be funny and interesting, by the way. Alright, I thought I covered this, so this is slightly redundant. Emerging adulthood is the term for the transition from adolescence to adulthood, 18 to 25 years of age, which is pretty much inclusive of, young adulthood. Who is an adult? Determining just when an individual becomes an adult is difficult. Some markers include marriage. Well, there's young people, really young people, 16, 17 that get married. Does that make them an adult? Well, no. A full-time job. I've had a full-time job when I was 14. That didn't make me an adult. Economic independence and self-responsibility. It really just depends, I guess, on who is defining it. And some people believe that adulthood starts at 18. You're an adult once you're 18 years old. Other people feel like when you're 21. If you think of it from a cognitive standpoint, because your prefrontal cortex, and this has nothing to do with this slide, by the way, but it came to my mind as I switched slides. Because your prefrontal cortex is still developing well until the age of 25, I think that it would be safe to say that adulthood starts at 25, which is why they have that in-between phase of emerging adulthood between adolescence and actual adulthood between 19 to 25. So that would make sense if you think of it from a cognitive standpoint. Now, we're not going to go into adapting to college and special challenges that students face, so I'll move on. How can development be characterized, and what is emerging adulthood? We just discussed that. It says here that most adults reach their peak physical development and are healthiest during their 20s. They did some research and found that 95.8% of adults, young adults in their early 20s, believe that they in fact were physically fit. Not just physically fit, but at their peak when it comes to good health. Only, I believe it was only about 4.2% believe that they may have had some type of poor health, and it was attributed to them having some prior diagnosis, so maybe cancer or asthma or something like that. It says here that young adults rarely recognize that bad eating habits, heavy drinking, and smoking in early adulthood can impair their health as they age. Well, that is true, which is why we do so much harm to our bodies early on, and then by the time we're 50 and 60, we're starting to feel the effects of 50 years or all that time of just poor eating habits and heavy drinking and heavy smoking. So it's really important as young adults that we take care of our bodies, because at some point we're gonna regret half of the things we did to it in our young days when it is we're much older. Middle adulthood is characterized by some physical changes, particularly in appearance. You tend to get those parentheses by your mouth. If you start to get those really deep parentheses, you know you're in middle age. Individuals begin to lose height as well, so you might shrink a little bit, not because you're just, shrinking, but mostly because of bad posture. We tend to slouch a little bit more. We get that little curvature in your back, and before you know it, you're the hunchback of Notre Dame. We gain weight oftentimes that we can't take off. It depends on the individual. People do become more concerned about their health in their 40s, and for women, most women, we start menopause in our late 40s to early 50s. Menopause, of course, is marked by 1 year after the end of a woman having her menstrual cycle. So a year after that, you're considered to be menopausal or in menopause. Late adulthood today makes up a pretty large segment of the population. We have our baby boomers who are in late adulthood today. For anyone who wants to know what baby boomers are, these are your babies that were born right around the 1940s into 1950. And today they're in their 70s. They're the elderly crowd, the baby boomers, post-World War II babies. Lifespan and life expectancy. Lifespan is the maximum number of years any member of the species has been documented to live. Our lifespan, it says here, is about 120 years. Now, does that mean that we're going to live 120 years? Well, many of us don't. On average, we don't. We probably, women for sure outlive men, but you'll hear of the occasional 113-year-old individual or 110-year-old grandma, but it's not that we're all living 120 years. Life expectancy is what we need to look at. The number of years that will probably be lived by the average person born in a particular year. Life expectancy for today is 80 years old for women and 73 years old for men. Those statistics are pretty much what it looks like for the U.S. population. Of course, when we're in late adulthood, we have massive changes, massive, in physical appearance. We have gray hair, we have chronic diseases, arthritis, hypertension, a number of other issues, sometimes neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's and dementia. Exercise slows in the aging process. Exercise slows the aging process and helps older adults function in society. So exercise is important. A sense of control is important for health and survival. Now, on the other slide, I briefly mentioned, neurological disorders. Dementia is a neurological disorder. and it's a disorder that involves deterioration of mental functioning. 20% of individuals over 80 years of age have some type of dementia. There's dementia of the Alzheimer's type, and this is progressive, it's irreversible, and it's a gradual deterioration of a number of localized areas in your brain, namely memory it affects, reasoning, language, and eventually physical functioning, which tends to pretty much go last. More than 50% of dementias involve Alzheimer's disease. So in psychology, it's called dementia of the Alzheimer's type. The deterioration of the brain is characterized by the formation of amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary fibrillary tangles. What that is that the brain itself is actually starting to stop firing neurons in certain areas. It's dying in certain parts of their brain, and for some reason, again, seems to attack memory. And there is no cure for Alzheimer's. Of course, scientists are still working on it, and by studying the brains of people with really super sharp memories, they may be able to one day unlock the cure for Alzheimer's. Who knows? To give you an idea of what Alzheimer's looks like, this is a normal brain, and this is one with Alzheimer's. As you can see, it's much smaller, and the cavities that are you can see in here, all these nooks and crannies, are a lot more wider. There's a loss of gray matter, indicating a loss of synaptic activity. This is a normal brain here on this scan, and this is an Alzheimer's brain. You see how it lights up in comparison to this brain, this normal healthy brain, and it's just terrible to see what happens. All these gaps and holes and all of that is dying neural activity. Is just dying slowly, killing off brain cells in certain parts of the brain, and it's completely irreversible. Now that we are we're going to move on here, because we talked about brain plasticity and brain and behavior, so I'll move on. Now we're on death and dying. Kubler-Ross in 1969 came up with 5 stages of dying. These 5 stages were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. If you think about it, death and dying can bring on a number of emotions. Denial is usually one of them. People will feel like, you know what, no, I'm not dying. I may have been given 6 months to live, but I think you're wrong. I'm going to go out there and get about 2-3 other opinions. Then there's anger. I'm mad that I'm dying. It's not fair. I didn't have enough time to do what I wanted to do. It's not fair that it's happening to me. Then there's bargaining. Okay, what if I do something here and maybe you could do something to cure me? Whatever it is you're bargaining. Or maybe you pray and you ask God to please spare my life. I'll go to church every single Sunday, and that in turn would be bargaining. Then there's depression. Nothing seems to be working. It seems like you're getting sicker and sicker. Death is inevitable, and eventually you accept death. There's acceptance. Now, it is important to note that it does not necessarily have to happen in this order. Someone who's dying can go from anger to denial and back to anger again. They don't necessarily have to be depressed about it or bargain. And they may actually accept it from the beginning and not even experience anger or denial or anything else. It's also important to note that the 5 stages of death and dying can also apply to other things, such as the end of a relationship. If you notice, if you break up with someone that you really loved, there might be some denial, even some anger. You might bargain with that individual. You may for sure experience some depression, and eventually you might accept that that relationship has ended. So while Kubler-Ross did have some pretty interesting theories as to what the stages of dying is, it's easy to make that connection with other things that cease to exist as well, or other things that may be pretty much going downhill, other than, yourself. So, coping with death. For those of you who are in nursing, you'll find this to be really important. It's important to know how to cope with people, not just family members, but help people who are dying themselves cope with dying. And it's important to know how to interact and communicate with them. Advantages of shared awareness for dying individuals, or coping with the death of someone else or with the family members. Dying individuals can close their lives in accord with their own ideas about proper dying. They may be able to complete projects, make arrangements for survivors, and participate in funeral decisions. They have the opportunity to reminisce and converse with others. Dying individuals will understand what is happening within their bodies and what the medical staff is doing to them. There's grieving for those individuals who are expecting a family member to die. And grief is an emotional numbness, disbelief, separation, anxiety, despair, sadness, and loneliness that accompanies loss of someone you love. Grief can be manageable for most people. There are people who don't really deal with grief very well, but it says here that many grieving spouses report that they have never gotten over their loss. And for some, that is the case. Some never remarry, and it's really devastating to lose a partner. Now, this is my last slide, death in different cultures. Different cultures can view death in different ways. Some look at it as a celebration, and others, of course, look at it as, just moving on to another life. Most societies throughout history have had philosophical or religious beliefs about death, and we're no exception here in the United States. We all look at it as something, usually with some type of religious undertone. Some of us believe when you die, you go to heaven, or in some cases, you may go to hell, depending on the life that you lived. In most societies, death is not viewed as the end of existence. For example, in Hinduism, Hindus believe in another life, that you don't just die, but you are reincarnated. You come back as some other type of being. The religious perspective is favored by most Americans, mainly Christian Americans, as well as Muslims, Jews, and people from a number of other faiths. So there is, again, some type of religious undertone when it comes to accepting death and believing in some type of afterlife. Alright, so this brings us to the end of human development, where it is we talked about prenatal development. You guys saw a video on adolescent development, and this video covered emerging adulthood, adult development, and aging. Look forward to speaking with you on the other slideshow.